The dust cloud on the horizon was the first sign of trouble in Silver Reef, Utah Territory, 1878. Violet Warner rode into town like a storm, her crimson dress a shock against the desert landscape, her reputation trailing behind her like the tail of a comet. They called her the Red Rose of Denver, a woman who'd left a string of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across 3 territories. Victor Blackburn watched her arrival from the weathered porch of the Silver Dollar Saloon, his thumbs hooked in his gun belt, eyes narrowed against the setting sun. The town marshal sidled up beside him, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "That there's the Warner woman," Marshal Jenkins said. "Word is she's running from something in Colorado. They say she'll bring nothing but trouble." Victor's mouth quirked up at one corner, his eyes never leaving the approaching rider. "Then I've been bored too long." The last rays of sunlight caught the silver of his spurs as he descended the steps. At 32, Victor had seen enough of life to know that trouble and opportunity often wore the same face. 10 years of driving cattle, 2 of bounty hunting, and 5 of owning the most profitable ranch outside Silver Reef had taught him to recognize both. Violet pulled her dappled mare to a stop before the town's only hotel. She was younger than Victor had expected, perhaps 25, with eyes the color of storm clouds and hair as black as a raven's wing. She dismounted with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than in drawing rooms, despite her fine clothes. "Need help with your bags, madam?" Victor asked, approaching with measured steps. She appraised him with cool detachment. "I need a lot of things, Cowboy, but not the kind you're offering. You don't know what I'm offering. I know your type." She smoothed her travel-wrinkled skirts. "Let me guess you own land, cattle, maybe even that fancy chestnut stallion tied outside the saloon. You're respected, maybe feared. And you think that entitles you to whatever catches your eye." Victor removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair the color of wheat. "Wrong on all counts except the stallion and the cattle. Name's Victor Blackburn, and I was merely being neighborly." "Neighborly." She tested the word as if it were a foreign language. "I don't plan on being anyone's neighbor for long. I'm passing through." "Everyone's passing through somewhere." He gestured toward the hotel. "Only decent place to stay in town, but the beds have fleas and the walls are thin as paper." Something like amusement flickered in her eyes. "Is that a warning or an invitation?" "Information, plain and simple." He replaced his hat. "Welcome to Silver Reef, Miss Warner. Town's small, but the gossip travels fast." "And what's the gossip saying about me?" "That you're running from something. That you've left a trail of broken men behind you, that you're trouble." She lifted her chin. "And what do you think about that?" Victor's smile deepened, genuine this time. "I think this town could use a little shaking up." The hotel proprietor appeared then, a wisp of a man with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose. He nearly tripped over himself in his hurry to assist Violet with her bags, casting nervous glances at Victor. "Mr. Blackburn," he nodded. "Didn't expect to see you in town before cattle auction day." "Just being sociable, Morton." Victor tipped his hat to Violet. "Miss Warner, I expect our paths will cross again." "I certainly hope not," she replied, but there was less conviction in her voice than before. Victor watched her disappear into the hotel before turning back toward the saloon. Inside, the usual crowd had gathered, ranchers drinking away the day's dust, miners spending their wages, and the occasional drifter passing through. He took his customary seat at the back corner table, where he could see both the door and the stairs leading to the private rooms above. "That the woman everyone's talking about?" asked Henry Wilson, the town's only banker and Victor's occasional poker companion. "Seems to be. They say she swindled a mining magnate in Denver out of $20,000. Henry lowered his voice. "Supposedly shot a man in Cheyenne, too." "Is that right?" Victor signaled for whiskey. Jenkins says she's trouble with a capital T, says we should run her out of town before she causes problems. Victor accepted the glass from the barkeep. Since when do we run people out of town before they've done anything wrong? Since they bring reputations like hers. Henry leaned closer. You do well to steer clear, Vic. Woman like that, she'll have her eyes on the biggest prize in town. That'd be you, with the double B being the most successful spread in the county. Victor swirled the amber liquid in his glass. I've faced down rustlers, survived the war, and weathered 3 droughts. I think I can handle one woman. That's what Joshua Palmer said in Durango. They found him face down in a creek bed with his pockets emptied and a knife in his back. You believe everything you hear, Henry. The banker huffed. I believe in protecting my investments, and you're one of them. Victor drained his glass. I appreciate the concern, but I make my own judgments about people. As if summoned by their conversation, Violet Warner appeared at the saloon entrance. She'd changed from her traveling clothes into a deep blue dress that accentuated her pale skin. The room quieted as she stepped inside, every eye tracking her movement toward the bar. She ordered whiskey neat, not the watered-down version typically served to women and paid with a gold coin. The bartender's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. Keep the change, she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. And the next round for these gentlemen is on me. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. She lifted her glass in a toast, took a deliberate sip, and then scanned the room until her eyes landed on Victor. With unhurried grace, she crossed to his table. Mind if I join you, Mr. Blackburn? Henry excused himself so quickly he knocked over his chair. Please, Victor gestured to the vacant seat. Though you might consider the company you're keeping, I have quite the reputation in these parts. Do you now? She settled across from him. Let me guess, hard but fair, man of few words, but those you speak carry weight, dangerous when crossed. You've been asking about me. Know your adversaries, first rule of survival. Is that what I am? An adversary? She studied him over the rim of her glass. You're a man with influence in a town I'm passing through. That makes you someone to be aware of. How long will you be passing through? Depends on what I find here. And what are you looking for, Miss Warner? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. A fresh start, perhaps, or at least a place to catch my breath. Running from something specific or just the past in general, isn't everyone. Victor considered this. Not everyone, some of us stand our ground. And how's that working out for you? There was no mockery in her tone, only genuine curiosity. Got my share of scars, but I sleep well at night. Must be nice, she murmured, and for a moment, he glimpsed something raw and vulnerable beneath her composed exterior. Before he could respond, the saloon doors burst open. 3 dust-covered men entered, hands hovering near their holsters. The tallest one, sporting a drooping mustache, scanned the room until his gaze landed on Violet. There you are, you thieving witch, he snarled. Violet didn't flinch, but Victor noticed her knuckles whiten around her glass. Gentlemen, she said coolly, you're a long way from Denver. Followed your trail through 3 territories, the man said, advancing. Mr. Hollister wants his property back. I won nothing that wasn't fairly wagered, she replied. Not my fault if Mr. Hollister can't tell a full house from a flush when he's in his cups. The man's face darkened. You cheated him, and everyone knows it. Victor stood slowly. This is my town, friends, and the lady is under my protection while she's here. The leader's eyes narrowed. You don't want to get in the middle of this, cowboy. Name's Victor Blackburn. I own the Double B Ranch and a fair portion of the businesses in this town, including this saloon. His voice remained conversational, but the set of his shoulders spoke of coiled tension. Now, you boys look trail-weary. How about I buy you a drink and we discuss this like civilized folk? The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Finally, the leader spat on the floor. One drink. Then we talk. Victor signaled the bartender, never taking his eyes off the three men. When they moved toward the bar, he leaned close to Violet. Back exit through the kitchen. My horse is outside. Head north on the main trail, then take the fork toward the mountains. There's a line shack about 5 miles in. I'll meet you there. I don't need your help, she whispered fiercely. Maybe not. But those men look like they mean to drag you back to Denver or worse. Your choice, Miss Warner. Trust me or take your chances. Indecision warred in her eyes. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, she slipped toward the kitchen. Victor approached the bar, positioning himself between the men and Violet's escape route. So, gentlemen, what brings Hollister's men all the way to Utah Territory? The leader accepted a whiskey. That ain't your concern. Anything that happens in my town is my concern. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes, including 3 armed men threatening a woman in my saloon. That woman stole $20,000 from one of the most powerful men in Colorado. Sounds like quite a tale. I'd like to hear the whole thing after you finish your drinks and check into the hotel for the night. It's getting late, and tempers run hot when men are tired. The man studied Victor, measuring him. You vouching for her? I'm suggesting we all get some rest and talk in the daylight, with clearer heads. A tense silence fell. Victor could almost see the calculations behind the leader's eyes, 3 against 1, but in a saloon full of witnesses, including the town marshal who had just entered. Fine, the man finally growled. But she better be here come morning. Hollister's not a patient man, and he's paying us well to bring her back. Victor nodded to the barkeep. Morton will set you up with rooms, first night's on me. He waited until all 3 men had followed Morton upstairs before slipping out the back. His chestnut stallion, Diablo, was exactly where he'd left him. Victor mounted swiftly and set off at a canter, taking a circuitous route out of town to ensure he wasn't followed. The night was clear and cold, the stars pricking the velvet sky like silver studs. Victor rode with the confidence of a man who knew every fold and wrinkle of the land. When he reached the line shack, he was surprised to find it dark. For a moment, he feared Violet had decided to strike out on her own. Then a voice came from the shadows beside the small building. You're late. She emerged from the darkness, his Winchester rifle balanced comfortably in her hands. She changed again, into practical riding clothes, trousers, boots, and a man's shirt under a heavy jacket. You know how to use that? He asked, dismounting. Point and pull the trigger. Not exactly complicated. There's a bit more to it than that. He reached for the rifle, but she stepped back. I'll keep it for now, if you don't mind. Victor shrugged. Suit yourself. There's firewood inside and some provisions. The interior of the line shack was Spartan but clean. A single room with a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a pot-bellied stove, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. Victor lit a lantern, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Violet remained by the door, rifle still in hand. Why are you helping me? Do I need a reason? Men always have reasons. He busied himself with starting a fire in the stove. Maybe I don't like seeing 3 against 1, especially when the one is a woman. I can take care of myself. I don't doubt it, but even the best of us need backup sometimes. She watched him work, her posture gradually relaxing as warmth filled the small space. How long have you been in Silver Reef? 5 years. Came west after the war, drove cattle for a while, then won the Double B in a poker game. You won a ranch. Previous owner was too fond of the cards and not fond enough of hard work. Victor straightened, dusting his hands on his jeans. Coffee, she nodded, finally setting the rifle aside to remove her jacket. Those men, they work for Elliot Hollister, mining baron with operations throughout Colorado. And did you steal from him? Violet's eyes flashed. I won that money fair and square. He challenged me to a game, thinking he'd take advantage of a woman. When I cleaned him out, he couldn't accept that he'd been bested. 20,000 is a lot to lose. It wasn't all cash. There was a deed to a silver claim included in the pot. Victor whistled low. No wonder he sent men after you. That's more than wounded pride, that's business. The claim is rightfully mine. Her voice turned bitter. But men like Hollister don't accept defeat, especially from women. He's claiming I cheated. Did you? She met his eyes squarely. No, I didn't have to. Hollister was drunk and overconfident. I just had to wait for him to make mistakes. Victor poured coffee into 2 tin cups. So you're a professional gambler. I'm a survivor. She accepted the cup. My father taught me cards before he taught me to read. Said a sharp mind was a woman's best weapon in a man's world. Sound advice. Until he was killed over a dispute at a table in St. Louis. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed old pain. I was 16. Had to make my own way after that. Victor settled into one of the chairs. And now you're running with a fortune and a bounty on your head. Not a bounty. Hollister wants to handle this privately. Wouldn't do for people to know a woman outplayed him. She sipped her coffee. I didn't expect him to track me this far west. A man doesn't get that rich by letting go of what he considers his. The money I've spent. But the claim, I was hoping to work it. Start fresh. Where is it? She hesitated, then reached into her boot and withdrew a folded document. Near Silverton. Small but high-grade ore, according to the survey. Victor studied the deed. This looks legitimate. It is. I had it verified in Denver before Hollister's accusations started. That's why I've been moving west. I intend to file it properly and start operations. That takes capital. I have enough. She took back the deed, tucking it away carefully. What I need is time to establish myself before Hollister catches up. Victor leaned back, considering. Stay here tonight. I'll return to town in the morning, see what Hollister's men are planning. Maybe I can negotiate. Violet laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. Negotiate with men like that? You'd be surprised what men will agree to when presented with the right incentives. And what would those be? I'm still working on that part. He rose, stretching. You take the bed. I'll keep watch. We could share, she suggested, her tone deliberately casual. It's cold and that's a very small stove. Victor studied her, noting the calculation behind the offer. I'll manage. Get some rest, Miss Warner. Tomorrow might be a long day. A flash of something respect, perhaps crossed her features. She nodded and moved to the narrow bed, lying down fully clothed, her boots still on. Victor took a position by the window, rifle across his knees. Outside, the desert night had transformed the landscape into a silver-washed otherworld. In the distance, a coyote howled, the sound echoing across the empty spaces. Why did you really help me? Violet asked into the darkness. The truth this time. Victor was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Everyone deserves a second chance, he finally said. Even a woman with a reputation like yours. And what about your reputation? Won't helping me tarnish the upstanding Victor Blackburn name? Maybe I don't care as much about that as people think. Or maybe you have secrets of your own. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Everyone has secrets, Miss Warner. The question is whether they define us. Call me Violet. If we're going to be fugitives together, we might as well use first names. We're not fugitives. We're just strategizing. Her soft laugh followed him into the night as he resumed his vigil, watching for any sign of pursuit across the moonlit desert. Dawn broke with a crimson slash across the eastern sky. Victor had dozed fitfully, one eye always on the approach to the lined shack. Violet slept soundly, her features softened in repose, looking younger and more vulnerable than the sharp-eyed woman of the previous evening. He made coffee and was frying salt pork when she stirred, sitting up and immediately reaching for her boot where the deed was hidden. Still there, Victor said without turning, and no sign of pursuit. She joined him at the stove, accepting a tin plate of breakfast. "What's the plan?" "I ride back to town, gauge the situation, you stay here. And if you don't come back, then you take my horse and head west. There's a map in my saddlebag showing the way to Cedar City. You can catch the stage there to California if need be." She studied him over her coffee. "You've thought this through. I like to be prepared. For helping strange women escape pursuers, for contingencies." They ate in companionable silence. When finished, Victor collected the plates and stepped outside to saddle Diablo. "I should be back by nightfall," he said, mounting up. "There's ammunition for the Winchester in the trunk under the bed if you need it. Don't shoot unless you have to sound carries in these hills." Violet stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the morning chill. "Be careful, Victor. Hollister's men aren't known for negotiation. Neither am I when it comes down to it." He tipped his hat. "Keep the door barred." The ride back to Silver Reef took less time in daylight. Victor approached from the north, circling to enter town from the direction of his ranch as if he'd been there all night. The town was stirring to life, shopkeepers opening their establishments, the blacksmith's forge already glowing. He stabled Diablo at the livery and made his way to the Silver Dollar. The saloon was quiet this early, with only Morton sweeping the floors and setting up for the day. "Those men still here?" Victor asked without preamble. Morton nodded toward the ceiling. "In rooms 3 and 4. Came down about an hour ago asking if anyone had seen the Warner woman. Marshal Jenkins was here, told them she must have skipped town during the night." "How'd they take that?" "Not well. The big one calls himself Chambers, said they'd search every building if necessary. They have no authority here. Try telling them that. They're carrying enough hardware to start a small war." Victor considered this. "Anyone else been asking about Miss Warner?" Telegraph operator mentioned a message came through from Denver last night for the marshal. That was concerning. If Jenkins was corresponding directly with Hollister or his associates, the situation was more complicated than a simple pursuit. "Thanks, Morton. If those men come down, tell them I'm looking for them. I'll be at the marshal's office." Jenkins was at his desk when Victor entered, a cup of coffee in one hand and a telegram in the other. He looked up with unconcealed surprise. "Blackburn. Didn't expect to see you in town 2 days running. Heard we had some excitement last night." Victor settled into the chair opposite the desk. "3 men looking for a woman." Jenkins set down the telegram, casually placing a ledger over it. "Violet Warner. Seems she's wanted in Colorado for theft and fraud. Wanted officially or just by Elliot Hollister." The marshal's eyes narrowed. "You know something about this?" "I know that 3 armed men rode into my town threatening a woman who, as far as I'm aware, hasn't broken any laws in Utah territory. Hollister's telegram says she stole property worth $20,000. Did he mention that property was won in a poker game? Or that the theft is actually a disputed gambling debt?" Jenkins leaned back. "You seem mighty well informed for a man who just met her yesterday. I make it my business to know what happens in Silver Reef. And where is Miss Warner now? Gone, I imagine." "Smart woman would have ridden out after those men showed up." The marshal studied him. "Those men think you helped her." "Do they now?" "Said you intervened last night, then both of you disappeared." Victor smiled thinly. "I escorted a lady to her hotel room, then went home to my ranch." "Is that a crime now, Jenkins?" "No crime, just curious timing." "Speaking of curious," Victor nodded toward the partially hidden telegram. "Since when does the Marshal of Silver Reef take orders directly from Colorado mining barons?" A flush crept up Jenkins' neck. "I'm not taking orders. Just cooperating with legitimate inquiries." "And what does Hollister offer for this cooperation? Because I know the territorial government doesn't pay you enough to be this interested in a gambling dispute." The marshal's hand twitched toward his gun before he caught himself. "Careful, Blackburn." Even you can't throw accusations at a law officer without consequence. Victor stood, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. No accusations, just observations. Those men have no jurisdiction here. Neither does Hollister. If they want to file formal charges, they can go through the proper channels. Until then, I expect the law to treat Miss Warner like any other citizen passing through presumed innocent. You're interfering in matters you don't understand. Maybe, or maybe I understand better than you think. Victor moved to the door. Just so we're clear, if any harm comes to Miss Warner while she's in Silver Reef, I'll hold you personally responsible. He left Jenkins sputtering and headed toward the hotel. Chambers and his men were just emerging from the building, faces dark with frustration. "Blackburn," Chambers called, striding to intercept him. "Where is she?" Victor stopped, hands loose at his sides. "Good morning to you too, gentlemen. Sleep well." The second man, a wiry fellow with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "Don't play games. The woman left with you last night." "I escorted Miss Warner to her room as any gentleman would. If she's no longer there, perhaps she didn't care for the accommodations." Chambers moved closer, his breath sour with stale whiskey. "Hollister wants his property back. $20,000, plus the deed to the Silverton claim. Sounds like a matter for the courts, not hired guns. We ain't leaving without her." Victor met the man's glare steadily. "Then I suggest you get comfortable. Silver Reef can be quite pleasant this time of year." The third man, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Hollister's offering $1,000 reward for her return. Could be we'd split that with anyone who helped us find her. A generous offer, but I'm comfortable enough without Hollister's money." Chambers spat in the dust. "Then stay out of our way. We find her, we're taking her back to Denver. Any man who interferes might not live to regret it." Victor smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." The standoff stretched until Jenkins appeared, moving purposefully toward them. "Everything all right here, gentlemen?" "Just a friendly conversation," Victor said, stepping back. "These men were telling me about their business with Miss Warner." "We were explaining that interfering with Mr. Hollister's interests is unhealthy," Chambers growled. Jenkins nodded. "Mr. Blackburn understands the situation now, I'm sure. Why don't you men come back to my office? I might have some information that could help." Victor watched them go, his mind working through possibilities. Jenkins was clearly in Hollister's pocket, which complicated matters. If he waited until nightfall to return to Violet, that would give the marshal and Hollister's men nearly 12 hours to search the surrounding area. He needed to move her, and quickly. First, though, he needed supplies. He visited the general store, purchasing food, ammunition, and medical supplies, paying with cash and offering no explanation for the unusual quantities. Next, he stopped by the bank, where Henry Wilson was only too happy to assist one of his biggest depositors. "Quite a withdrawal," Henry remarked as he counted out the money. "Planning a cattle purchase, something like that." Victor pocketed the cash. "Henry, what have you heard about Elliot Hollister?" The banker glanced around, though they were alone in his office. "Mining magnate from Denver. Very powerful, very wealthy. Why do you ask? His name's come up. I like to know who I'm dealing with." "Well, I can tell you he's not a man to cross. Controls half the silver mines in Colorado and has judges and politicians in his pocket. Ruthless in business, buys out smaller operations, sometimes through less than ethical means. Such as," Henry lowered his voice, "rumors of claim jumping, mysterious accidents befalling competitors. Nothing proven, mind you, but where there's smoke. And his financial standing, rock solid last I heard. Though there was talk of overextension, recently he's been buying up claims faster than he can develop them." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "Thanks, Henry. One more thing, if a woman wanted to file a mining claim, Would she face any legal obstacles? A woman. Henry seemed surprised by the question. Well, there's no specific law against it, but it's unusual. She'd need to establish her identity as the rightful owner and prove she has the means to develop the claim. Why do you ask? Just curious about the legalities. Victor rose. Thanks for your help. Victor, Henry called as he reached the door, whatever you're involved in, be careful. Men like Hollister play for keeps. So do I, Henry, so do I. Victor's next stop was the telegraph office, where he sent 2 messages, one to his foreman instructing him to prepare the hunting cabin on the northern edge of his property, and another to an old acquaintance in Denver requesting information on Hollister and the Silverton claim. Both were signed with a code name they'd established years ago. By mid-afternoon, Victor had completed his preparations and was ready to return to the line shack. He retrieved Diablo from the livery, along with a second horse, a sturdy bay mare suitable for a long journey. He was leading both animals toward the edge of town when he noticed unusual activity near the marshal's office. Jenkins and Chambers were mounting up, joined by several local men Victor recognized as occasional deputies. They were armed and appeared to be organizing a search party. Victor altered his course, leading the horses behind the row of buildings until he reached the back of the Silver Dollar. Morton was in the storeroom, cataloging a shipment of whiskey. Need a favor, old friend, Victor said. Those men searching for Miss Warner, which way are they headed? Morton glanced toward the front of the saloon. Jenkins was in here earlier, asking if anyone had seen riders heading east toward the mountains. Said he was organizing a posse to look for a fugitive. East. That was the opposite direction from the line shack. That's what he said. Though between you and me, I overheard one of Hollister's men mention checking the north trails too. Said something about line shacks and hunting cabins. Victor's blood ran cold. They were guessing, but they weren't far off. I need to use your back door. And if anyone asks, you haven't seen me since this morning. Morton nodded, no questions asked. Be careful, Vic. Jenkins is acting more like Hollister's man than our marshal. Victor slipped out the rear entrance and took a circuitous route out of town, staying in the cover of ravines and washes. Once clear of Silver Reef, he pushed both horses to a gallop, taking the most direct path to the line shack. The sun was beginning its westward descent when he arrived. The shack appeared undisturbed, but there was no sign of Violet. He approached cautiously, rifle at the ready. Violet. He called, "It's Victor." Nothing. Heart pounding, he kicked open the door and found himself staring down the barrel of his Winchester. You're back early, Violet said, lowering the rifle. We need to move. Now. He explained about Jenkins and the search parties. They haven't found this place yet, but they will. We need to reach my hunting cabin before dark. Violet was already gathering her meager belongings. I saw riders about an hour ago heading east, thought they might be searching. Jenkins is leading them on a wild goose chase for now, but it won't last. Chambers mentioned checking cabins and line shacks to one of his men. They were on the trail within minutes, Victor leading the way through a network of canyons and gullies that wouldn't show tracks. The hunting cabin was situated in a dense stand of pine at the base of the mountains, nearly invisible until you were upon it. This is your property? Violet asked as they approached. Northern edge of the Double B. We use this cabin during hunting season, but it's comfortable enough year-round. Unlike the line shack, the hunting cabin was well appointed a large main room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen. The furniture was rustic but sturdy, and the pantry was stocked with preserved foods. We should be safe here for a few days, Victor said, unloading their supplies. No one knows about this place except my ranch hands, and they're loyal. Violet explored the cabin, her expression thoughtful. You've gone to a lot of trouble for a stranger. Maybe you're not a stranger anymore. He busied himself with building a fire. Besides, I don't like bullies, and from what I've learned about Elliot Hollister, he's the worst kind. What have you heard? That he's powerful, ruthless, and possibly overextended financially. I sent for more information from Denver. Should have a reply in a day or two. Violet sat at the rough-hewn table watching him work. Why does this matter to you, Victor? Really? He was silent for a long moment, arranging kindling in the fireplace. My mother was a gambler, he finally said. Card sharp. Made a living moving from town to town, playing in backrooms and saloons. Like me. Similar circumstances, maybe. She was good enough to support us both after my father died in the war. But a woman alone, making her way in a man's world, she faced the same accusations. Cheating. Theft. Worse. What happened to her? Victor's face hardened. Man named Garrett claimed she cheated him, followed her for 3 states. When he caught up to us in Kansas, he didn't bother with accusations or demands, just shot her in the street. I'm sorry, Violet said softly. I was 15. Too young to call him out properly, but old enough to track him to Oklahoma territory. Victor struck a match, setting the kindling ablaze. I learned 2 things that year: how to survive on my own and how men like Garrett operate. They don't want justice. They want control. And they'll destroy anyone who challenges that. And Hollister reminds you of Garrett. Cut from the same cloth. Different circumstances, but the same arrogance. The same entitlement. He straightened, meeting her eyes. I couldn't save my mother, but maybe I can help you. Violet held his gaze, something shifting in her expression, a softening, a recognition. Thank you, she said simply. They settled into a companionable routine, preparing dinner from the supplies Victor had brought. As night fell, the cabin grew cozy, the fire casting dancing shadows on the log walls. We should sleep in shifts, Victor suggested, just to be safe. I'll take first watch. You look exhausted. He started to protest, then recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. Wake me at midnight. He took the bedroom while Violet stationed herself by the main room's window, rifle across her lap. Despite his exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. His mind raced with plans, contingencies, memories of his mother's final days intertwined with concerns for Violet's safety. Sometime before midnight, he gave up on sleep and returned to the main room. Violet sat exactly as he'd left her, her profile gilded by firelight. Couldn't sleep, she asked without turning. Too much on my mind. He settled in the chair opposite her. Tell me about the Silverton claim. Why is it so important to Hollister? She withdrew the deed from her boot, spreading it on the table between them. It's not the size, it's the location. See this boundary line. The claim sits between 2 of Hollister's largest operations. He's been trying to buy out every independent mine in the area to consolidate his holdings. Victor studied the document, and this one stands in his way. Exactly. Plus, early surveys suggest the vein is exceptionally rich. Previous owner didn't have the capital to develop it properly, which is why he was willing to wager it. And you plan to work it yourself. That was my intention. I have enough saved to hire a small crew, purchase basic equipment. It won't be a large operation, but it could be profitable enough to give me independence. A woman running a silver mine. Victor smiled. That would ruffle some feathers in Silverton. I'm used to ruffling feathers. I believe it. He traced the boundary lines on the deed. Hollister won't stop coming after you, you know, not as long as you have this. I know. Her voice was quiet but determined. But I won't give it up. This is my chance for something legitimate, something that's mine. I'm tired of living on the edges, Victor. Always moving, always watching my back. There might be another way. An idea had been forming in his mind since his conversation with the banker, but it would require patience and trust. I'm listening. Henry Wilson, the banker in Silver Reef, mentioned that Hollister might be overextended, buying claims faster than he can develop them. What if we could use that against him? Violet leaned forward. How? File the claim legally in Silverton, establish ownership beyond question. Then, instead of operating it immediately, offer to sell it to Hollister's competitor at a premium. With the right timing and the right buyer, you could turn that 20,000 into 50 or more. And which competitor would stand against Hollister? I have connections in Denver from my cattle driving days, people who owe me favors. One of them works for Cornwall Mining, Hollister's biggest rival. Violet considered this. Even if it worked, Hollister would still come after me for the original 20,000 he claims I stole. Unless we can prove you won it fairly. Victor met her gaze steadily. Were there witnesses to the game? Several. The barkeep, 2 regular players, even the saloon girl who was serving drinks. But they all work at Hollister's favorite establishment. They won't cross him. Everyone has a price or a pressure point. You're suggesting we bribe witnesses. I'm suggesting we find leverage. Everyone in Hollister's orbit has something to hide, something to protect. We just need to discover what that is. Violet studied him, a new respect in her eyes. You've done this before. Let's just say I understand how men like Hollister operate. He folded the deed carefully. But first, we need to get you safely to Silverton to file the claim. After that, we can work on building your case. She raised an eyebrow. You're planning to come with me, unless you object to the company. A slow smile spread across her face. I suppose having a notorious rancher as an escort might be useful. Notorious. Is that what they're saying about me now, among other things? Her smile turned teasing. They say Victor Blackburn never takes sides unless there's something in it for him. So what's your angle in all this? He leaned back, considering. Maybe I'm just tired of being bored. She laughed then, the sound warm and genuine. Well, I can promise you won't be bored with me around. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Victor felt a pull he hadn't experienced in years, not just attraction, though that was certainly there, but recognition. A kinship of spirits. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. They both tensed, Victor moving swiftly to douse the lantern. In the sudden darkness, they stood side by side at the window, watching as a group of riders passed along the lower trail, too far to see the cabin but close enough to raise alarm. Jenkins, Violet whispered. Can't tell, but they're heading west away from us. They remained still until the riders disappeared from view. When Victor relit the lantern, the atmosphere had changed, the easy camaraderie replaced by tension. We should leave at first light, he said. Make for Cedar City. We can catch the stage to Silverton from there. And if they're watching the stage, then we find another way. I have friends in Cedar City who might help. Violet nodded, her expression resolute. I'll take the first watch after all. You need rest if you're going to lead us through the mountains tomorrow. This time, Victor didn't argue. He retreated to the bedroom, leaving the door ajar. As he drifted toward sleep, he heard Violet humming softly a melancholy tune his mother used to sing, about a wanderer finding home. The coincidence stirred something in his chest, a mix of old grief and new hope that followed him into dreams. They departed before dawn, Victor leading them along game trails high in the foothills. Progress was slow but deliberate, with frequent stops to check for pursuers. By mid-afternoon, they had covered nearly 15 miles, the terrain gradually changing from pine forest to scrubland as they descended toward the desert floor. We'll make camp in that box canyon, Victor said, pointing to a narrow opening in the red rock formations ahead. Good protection, only one way in or out. The canyon proved ideal. A spring bubbled from the rock face, and the high walls offered shelter from both weather and prying eyes. As they made camp, Violet demonstrated surprising outdoor skills, gathering firewood and setting up a small cooking fire in a protected alcove. You've done this before. Victor observed as she efficiently unpacked their provisions. "I told you my father was a gambler. We didn't always stay in towns." She arranged coffee and beans for their evening meal. "Some of my earliest memories are of camping in places like this, learning to read the stars, to find water, to move without leaving signs. Useful education for a young girl. He wanted me to be self-sufficient. Said a woman who can survive on her own never has to depend on a man's charity or tolerate his cruelty. Wise man. He was, just not wise enough to walk away from a rigged game in St. Louis." She stirred the beans, her expression distant. "What about your father? You mentioned he died in the war. Antietam. I barely remember him, just a tall shadow, the smell of pipe tobacco, hands that could gentle the wildest horse." Victor leaned against the canyon wall, watching twilight paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "My mother never remarried. Said once you've known real love, anything less is just settling." "And have you known real love?" The question caught him off guard. "Once. Or I thought I did. Cattle baron's daughter back in Texas. We were engaged until her father discovered my mother's profession. Couldn't have his precious bloodline tainted by a gambler's son." "His loss," Violet said simply. Their eyes met across the fire, holding for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Victor found himself noticing details he'd missed before: the slight curve at the corner of her mouth when she was holding back a smile, the way her eyes caught the firelight, turning from storm gray to silver. He cleared his throat. "We should reach Cedar City by tomorrow evening if we push hard. I know the station master there. He can tell us if Jenkins or Hollister's men have been asking about stage passengers. And if they have, then we change direction. Head south to St. George, maybe cross into Arizona territory. Options are open." Violet served the beans and coffee, settling beside him against the canyon wall. They ate in companionable silence, the desert night settling around them like a blanket. "You could still walk away from this," she said finally. "Return to your ranch. Tell Jenkins you don't know where I am. There's no reason for you to risk everything for a woman you barely know." Victor considered this. "Maybe I'm not risking everything. Maybe I'm just finally doing something that matters. Running a successful ranch doesn't matter. It's comfortable, profitable, but it's not." He searched for the right word. "Exciting," she supplied. "Meaningful," he corrected. "When I won that ranch, I thought I'd found my purpose. Build something lasting, put down roots, and for a while that was enough, but lately—" He trailed off, staring into the fire. "You've been restless." "Something like that." He glanced at her. "What about you? Is a silver mine really what you want, or just a means to an end?" Violet wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, absorbing its warmth. "I want to stop running. Stop living by my wits alone, wondering where my next meal will come from if the cards turn against me. The mine represents stability, respectability. But I wonder if I'd be any good at it. Running a business, managing men, dealing with the technical aspects of mining. Cards, I understand people's tells, the mathematics of probability. This would be different. You'd learn. You strike me as a woman who masters whatever she sets her mind to." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Thank you for that." They fell silent again, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of small creatures in the brush. "Take the bedroll," Victor said finally. "I'll keep watch for a while." "We could share," Violet suggested, her tone deliberately light. "These desert nights get cold." Victor met her gaze, recognizing the invitation for what it was. "Violet, I'm not offering out of gratitude," she said quickly, "or calculation, just, I haven't trusted anyone in a long time. It feels good to trust you." The admission hung between them, fragile and profound. Victor reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek. I want to be worthy of that trust, he said softly. She leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. You already are. The kiss, when it came, was tentative at first, a question, an exploration. Then Violet's arms slid around his neck, and caution gave way to something more urgent. Victor pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other at the small of her back. When they finally parted, breathless, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I wasn't expecting this, he admitted. Neither was I. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. But I'm not sorry, nor am I. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. But we should be clear about what this is, what we want. Right now, I just want you, Violet whispered, her eyes dark with desire. Tomorrow can take care of itself. Under the vast canopy of stars, they came together not as fugitive and protector, but as equals, each recognizing in the other a kindred spirit. Their lovemaking was both tender and fierce, a claiming and a surrender. Afterward, they lay entwined in the bedroll, Violet's head pillowed on Victor's chest. He traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, watching as she drifted towards sleep. Victor, she murmured. Thank you for seeing me. Not the reputation, not the facade, just me. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Thank you for the same. She fell asleep in his arms, her breathing deep and even. Victor remained awake, keeping vigil, marveling at how quickly his life had changed. 3 days ago, he had been the respectable rancher of Silver Reef, content if not fulfilled. Now he was on the run with a notorious gambler, planning to outmaneuver one of the most powerful men in Colorado. And for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. They reached Cedar City by sunset the following day, approaching cautiously from the north to avoid being seen. Victor left Violet concealed in a stand of cottonwoods while he entered town to gather information. The station master, an old friend named Caleb Wilson, confirmed Victor's fears. 3 men were here yesterday, asking about a dark-haired woman traveling alone, Caleb reported in the privacy of the station office. Said she was a fugitive from Denver. Marshall from Silver Reef was with them. They watching the stages, had a man at every departure yesterday. Less vigilant today, but still around. Victor considered this. What about freight wagons? Any heading toward Colorado? Mason's running a load of mining equipment to Durango day after tomorrow. He could use an armed escort if you're looking for work. Caleb's eyes twinkled. And I hear he doesn't ask too many questions about passengers who contribute to the cause. Good man, Mason. Victor pressed a gold coin into Caleb's palm. I was never here, old friend. Never saw you. Caleb pocketed the coin. Though if I had, I might suggest the old Murphy place for the night. Vacant since the family moved to California last spring. Still has furniture, far enough from town to be private. With this information, Victor purchased supplies and made his way back to Violet. They approached the abandoned Murphy homestead after dark, a small but well-built cabin on the outskirts of town. Mason will take us as far as Durango, Victor explained as they settled in. From there, it's a short journey to Silverton. Violet busied herself lighting lamps in the dusty cabin. And if Hollister's men are watching Silverton too, one bridge at a time. By the time we reach Durango, we'll have more information. The following day, Victor ventured into town again, this time to send telegrams, one to his foreman with instructions for managing the ranch in his absence, and another to his contact in Denver, requesting a meeting in Durango. When he returned to the cabin, he found Violet poring over a map of Colorado. The deed shows the claim here, she said, pointing to a location north of Silverton. According to this survey note, it's accessible by a trail from the main road. Victor studied the map. Isolated, but not too remote. Good combination for our purposes. If we can reach it without being spotted. Mason knows the back trails. We'll avoid the main roads near Silverton." That night, they made love again, the urgency of their first encounter giving way to something more deliberate, more tender. Afterward, as they lay together in the narrow bed, Victor found himself contemplating a future he hadn't previously imagined, one that included Violet. "What happens after?" he asked into the darkness. "After we file the claim and deal with Hollister?" Violet's hand, which had been tracing patterns on his chest, stilled. "I haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe it's time we both did." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just that I'm not ready for this to end when our business in Silverton is concluded. Neither am I." Her admission was soft but certain. "But my life has never allowed for long-term plans. Maybe it's time that changed." They departed Cedar City before dawn, meeting Mason at a predetermined spot west of town. The freight wagon was heavily laden with mining equipment, creating ample hiding spaces among the crates and machinery. Mason, a grizzled veteran of the freight routes, asked no questions beyond whether they could handle weapons if trouble arose. "Had some problems with road agents near the territorial line," he explained. "Extra guns are always welcome." The journey to Durango would take nearly a week, following a circuitous route through the mountains to avoid main roads and settlements where Hollister's men might be watching. Victor and Violet took turns riding in the wagon and scouting ahead, always alert for signs of pursuit. By the third day, they had settled into a comfortable routine. During the day they traveled, Victor often riding alongside Mason, discussing routes and conditions ahead, while Violet kept watch from the wagon. At night, they made camp away from the trail, sharing a tent pitched at a discreet distance from Mason's. It was during one of these nights, seated beside a small fire as Mason snored in the distance, that Victor broached the subject of their future again. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what happens in Silverton." Violet looked up from cleaning her pistol. "And filing the claim is just the first step. You'll need capital to develop it properly, or to hold out until we can find a buyer willing to pay what it's worth." "I have some savings. Enough to fend off Hollister's lawyers, his bribe attempts, his threats," she frowned. "What are you suggesting, a partnership?" Victor met her gaze steadily. "I have capital, you have the claim. Together we'd have a stronger position than either of us alone." "A business partnership?" Her tone was carefully neutral, to start with, "though I hope it might become more." He reached for her hand. "I'm not proposing marriage, Violet, not yet, but I am proposing we see where this leads, together." She studied their joined hands. "You'd leave your ranch." "Everything you've built. I'd keep the ranch, hire a manager to run the day-to-day operations, split my time between Utah and Colorado." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Unless you'd consider making Silver Reef your home base instead. You've thought this through." "I have." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I want you in my life, Violet, not just for this adventure but beyond. How we arrange that, well, that's something we can figure out together." Her eyes searched his face, looking for hesitation or uncertainty. Finding none, she leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held both promise and passion. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "To the partnership, to seeing where this leads, to figuring it out together." When they reached Durango 5 days later, Victor's contact was waiting at the arranged meeting place, a private room above the Silver Spur Saloon. Jacob Reynolds was a thin, scholarly-looking man whose wire-rimmed spectacles and neat attire belied his position as one of the shrewdest business agents in the Colorado mining industry. "Victor," he greeted warmly, rising from the table where maps and documents were spread. "It's been too long." "Jacob," they shook hands. "This is Violet Warner, my partner." Jacob's eyebrows rose slightly at the introduction, but he merely nodded politely. Miss Warner, a pleasure. Once seated, Jacob wasted no time. I've gathered the information you requested. Elliot Hollister's position is indeed more precarious than is generally known. He's overextended on at least 3 major acquisitions, and his latest venture, a smelting operation in Leadville, is behind schedule and over budget. So he's vulnerable, Victor concluded. Financially, yes. But that makes him more dangerous, not less. A desperate man takes desperate measures. What about the Silverton claim? Violet asked. Why is it so important to him? Jacob unfolded a detailed map of the Silverton mining district. This claim, he tapped the location marked on Violet's deed, sits at a critical juncture. Hollister's 2 largest producing mines flank it on either side. More importantly, geological surveys suggest the richest vein runs directly through your property. So without my claim, his operations are isolated from each other, Violet mused, and he's missing the most valuable section of the vein. Exactly. Jacob adjusted his spectacles. He's been attempting to consolidate his holdings in the area for years. Your claim is the missing piece. Victor studied the map. And Cornwall Mining, would they be interested? Extremely. I've made discreet inquiries without mentioning the specific property. They're eager to establish a foothold in the Silverton district. This claim would give them precisely that. Violet glanced at Victor. So we have options. Indeed you do. Jacob gathered his papers. However, before you can entertain any offers, you must file the claim legally and establish clear ownership. Given Hollister's accusations, that may prove challenging. We need witnesses to the poker game, Victor said. People who can testify that Violet won the deed fairly. I've looked into that as well. Jacob withdrew a folded paper from his breast pocket. The barkeep at the Diamond Saloon where the game took place, a man named Sullivan, recently purchased a small business in Georgetown. Curious timing, given his previously modest circumstances. Hollister bought his silence, Violet concluded, most likely, but there were others present that night. A dealer named Ferguson, 2 regular players, Williams and Donovan, and a saloon girl called Ruby. Violet nodded. They were all there. Ferguson dealt the game himself. Ferguson still works at the Diamond, as do Williams and Donovan. Ruby, however, has relocated to a more upscale establishment in Denver, the Golden Lady. Victor considered this information. We need to speak with her. A saloon girl sees everything, remembers everything, especially when large sums are changing hands. She would be your most credible witness, Jacob agreed. Less directly under Hollister's influence than the others. They spent the next hour developing a strategy. Jacob would arrange a meeting with Ruby in Denver, while Victor and Violet proceeded to Silverton to file the claim. Once legal ownership was established, they would negotiate with Cornwall Mining for a potential sale, using the threat of competition to pressure Hollister into dropping his accusations. It's risky, Jacob warned as they concluded. Hollister won't take this lying down. He'll fight you every step of the way. Let him, Violet said, a steely determination in her voice. I've spent my life avoiding confrontation, moving on when things got difficult. Not this time. Jacob studied her with newfound respect. You know, Victor, when you described your new partner as formidable, I thought you might be exaggerating. I stand corrected. Victor smiled, his hand finding Violet's under the table. She continually surprises me too. They left Durango the following morning, traveling on horseback along back trails to avoid detection. Jacob had provided detailed maps of the approach to Silverton, marking routes least likely to be watched by Hollister's men. The journey took them through some of the most spectacular scenery in Colorado's soaring mountains, crystal-clear streams, meadows ablaze with wildflowers. Despite the tension of their mission, both found moments to appreciate the rugged beauty surrounding them. I can see why people risk everything to stake claims here, Violet remarked as they paused at a high pass overlooking the valley where Silverton nestled. There's something about this land that makes you believe anything is possible. Victor, watching her face illuminated by the afternoon sun, felt a surge of emotion he hadn't expected, a certainty that, whatever the outcome of their venture, his life had irrevocably changed for the better since meeting her. "We'll make it possible," he said, reaching for her hand. Together. They descended into Silverton as dusk was falling, approaching from the north to avoid the main road. Following Jacob's instructions, they sought out a boarding house on the outskirts of town, run by a widow known for her discretion and her dislike of Hollister's heavy-handed tactics. Mrs. Abernathy welcomed them with minimal questions, providing a comfortable room at the back of the house and the promise of early breakfast. "Mining recorder's office opens at 8, she informed them. "Tuesdays are quiet, fewer people about." The next morning, they rose before dawn, reviewing their strategy one final time. The deed was in order, the transfer of ownership documented in the paperwork from the original poker game. Their story was straightforward. Violet had won the claim fairly, delayed filing due to travel, and now sought to establish her legal ownership. "Remember," Victor cautioned as they prepared to leave, "we're just ordinary investors looking to develop a promising claim, nothing to attract attention." "Ordinary," Violet repeated, smoothing the simple but respectable dress she had purchased in Durango. "Just a woman filing a mining claim with her business partner. Nothing unusual about that at all." He caught the irony in her tone. "Maybe not ordinary, but legitimate. That's what matters." The mining recorder's office was a small, cluttered space in the town's administrative building. The clerk, a balding man with ink-stained fingers, barely glanced up when they entered. "Filing or inquiry?" he asked, not pausing in his writing. "Filing," Victor replied. "For the Star Creek claim, North Quadrant." That got the clerk's attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he studied them. "Star Creek's been in dispute. Hollister Mining has a claim on that parcel." "No, they don't," Violet said firmly, placing the deed on the counter. "I am the legal owner of the Star Creek claim as documented here. I'm simply formalizing my ownership." The clerk examined the papers with obvious reluctance. "This says the claim was transferred in a poker game. That's highly irregular." "Irregular but not illegal," Victor pointed out. "The deed is properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. Hollister Mining won't like this." "Hollister Mining's preferences aren't relevant to the legal status of this claim," Violet stated. "Will you process our filing, or do we need to speak with your superior?" The clerk hesitated, clearly torn between fear of Hollister and his official duties. Finally, he reached for a large ledger. "There'll be a filing fee, $20. Victor placed the money on the counter. "We'd like a receipt and a copy of the registered deed when it's processed." "That'll take time. We'll wait." The process took nearly 2 hours, during which the clerk disappeared twice for consultations with unseen officials. Each time he returned looking more disgruntled. Finally, he handed over the official documents, the claim now registered in Violet's name with Victor listed as partner. "It's done," he said grudgingly. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Hollister doesn't take kindly to interference in what he considers his territory." "We appreciate your concern," Victor said, gathering the papers. "But Miss Warner's claim is legally sound. Even Hollister has to respect the law." The clerk's snort made his opinion of that statement clear. They left the office, documents secured inside Victor's jacket. Neither spoke until they were well away from the administrative building, heading back toward Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house. "He'll inform Hollister," Violet said quietly. "Undoubtedly. We need to move quickly. Visit the claim site today, then head to Denver to meet with Ruby." Once we have her testimony, we can approach Cornwall mining with a solid position. They had just turned onto a side street when Victor noticed two men detach themselves from the shadows of a storefront, moving to intercept them. He placed a protective hand at Violet's elbow, steering her toward a busier thoroughfare. "We're being followed," he murmured. "I see them," she replied, her stride never faltering. "Two more across the street." Victor assessed their options. They were still several blocks from the boarding house, and the men were clearly herding them away from public areas. "Next corner, we split up," he decided. "You head for the boarding house, collect our things. I'll lead them away, meet you at the livery in 30 minutes. "No," Violet squeezed his arm. "We stay together." Before they could debate further, a familiar voice called from behind them. "Miss Warner, Mr. Blackburn, what a fortunate encounter." They turned to find Chambers approaching, flanked by two of the men who had been following them. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Hollister would like to speak with you. He's at the Grand Hotel, just a friendly conversation about mutual interests." "Please convey our regrets," Victor replied evenly. "We have pressing business elsewhere." Chambers' smile tightened. "I'm afraid Mr. Hollister was quite insistent. He doesn't appreciate being ignored. Nevertheless, we must decline." Victor's hand moved subtly toward his gun. Chambers noticed. "I wouldn't advise that, Blackburn. Not in the middle of town. Not when Hollister has the local law in his pocket." As if on cue, a man wearing a sheriff's badge emerged from a nearby building. "Everything all right here, gentlemen?" "Madam." "Fine, Sheriff," Chambers answered before either could respond. "Just inviting some friends to a business meeting." The sheriff's gaze lingered on Victor and Violet, assessment in his eyes. "Make sure it stays friendly. Mr. Hollister mentioned you might be in town, Mr. Blackburn. Said you might be causing trouble." "We're here on legitimate business," Victor stated. "Just filed a mining claim, in fact." "Is that right?" The sheriff's expression remained neutral. "Well, this is a peaceful town. We like to keep it that way." The warning was unmistakable. Resist and find themselves in jail on trumped-up charges. Victor exchanged a glance with Violet, seeing the same calculation in her eyes. "Perhaps a brief meeting wouldn't hurt," she said smoothly. "Professional courtesy." Victor followed her lead. "Of course. Lead the way, Chambers." They were escorted to the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in Silverton, where Elliot Hollister had commandeered the entire top floor. Chambers led them to a luxuriously appointed suite where a man stood gazing out the window at the mountains beyond. He turned as they entered, tall, impeccably dressed, with silver hair, and the commanding presence of someone accustomed to obedience. His smile was practiced, revealing expensive dental work. "Miss Warner, Mr. Blackburn, thank you for joining me." Hollister gestured to comfortable chairs. "Please sit. Can I offer you refreshments? Brandy, perhaps?" "We prefer to stand," Victor replied, "and to keep this brief." Hollister's smile didn't waver. "Direct, I appreciate that in a business associate." "We're not associates," Violet said coolly. "Not yet. But I hope that might change." Hollister moved to a sideboard, pouring himself a measure of amber liquid. "I understand you filed a claim this morning." "The Star Creek property." "My property," Violet emphasized. "One fairly in a game you yourself initiated." "Ah, yes. That unfortunate misunderstanding." Hollister sipped his brandy. "I was not at my best that evening, influenced perhaps by excessive libation." "You weren't drunk," Violet countered. "Not until after you lost. You knew exactly what you were doing when you put that deed in the pot." Hollister's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his composure. "Memory is subjective, especially in emotionally charged situations. But let's not dwell on past disagreements. I invited you here to propose a solution beneficial to all parties." "We're listening," Victor said, though his tone suggested limited patience. I'm prepared to offer $25,000 for the Star Creek claim. Cash, immediately available. A 25% premium on the value wagered that night. Violet raised an eyebrow. If the claim is only worth $20,000, why the generous offer? Call it compensation for the inconvenience caused by this misunderstanding. And recognition of the claim's strategic location adjacent to my existing operations. Strategic indeed, Victor commented. Strategic enough that Cornwall Mining might pay considerably more than $25,000. A flash of genuine anger crossed Hollister's face before he controlled it. Cornwall Mining has no existing presence in Silverton. Their interest would be speculative at best. Perhaps, but speculation often drives the most profitable investments. Victor smiled thinly. Especially when the property in question contains the richest section of a vein running between two established mines. You've done your research, Mr. Blackburn. I'm impressed. Hollister set down his glass. $50,000. My final offer. More than fair considering the circumstances. And what circumstances are those? Violet asked. The disputed nature of your ownership. The legal challenges that would inevitably arise should you attempt to develop or sell the claim to anyone but me. Hollister's tone hardened. The difficulty of finding workers willing to cross me. Equipment that mysteriously breaks down. Shipments that never arrive. Are you threatening us, Mr. Hollister? Victor's voice remained calm, but his posture tensed. Merely outlining business realities in Silverton. I've invested years and millions developing this district. I protect my investments. Hollister moved closer, his focus now entirely on Violet. $50,000 buys you a new start anywhere you choose, Miss Warner, free from the reputation that follows you, free from looking over your shoulder. Isn't that what you've always wanted? For a moment, Violet hesitated, vulnerability flickering in her eyes. Then she straightened, meeting Hollister's gaze directly. What I want, Mr. Hollister, is what is rightfully mine. The Star Creek claim which I won fairly. The respect due to its legal owner. She smiled, cold and determined. And the satisfaction of knowing that when you put that deed in the pot, you made the most expensive mistake of your career. Hollister's mask of civility dropped. You'll regret this decision, Miss Warner. Both of you will. I built Silverton. I own Silverton. Nothing happens here without my permission. Yet somehow we managed to file our claim this morning, Victor observed mildly. Seems your grip might be slipping. Get out. Hollister turned away, visibly struggling to control his temper. Chambers, show our guests out. And ensure they understand the consequences of their choice. Chambers stepped forward, but Victor moved faster, placing himself between the man and Violet. We can find our own way, and as for consequences, they cut both ways, Hollister. Remember that. They left the suite with as much dignity as possible, Chambers and another man following at a discreet distance. In the hotel lobby, Victor steered Violet toward a quiet corner. We need to leave town. Now. His voice was low, urgent. Head for Denver immediately, meet with Ruby, then approach Cornwall Mining from a position of strength. Violet nodded, her face pale but determined. The boarding house first for our belongings, then the livery. If we get separated, continue to Denver. Jacob will meet you at the Golden Lady. We won't get separated. She squeezed his hand. Together, remember. They retrieved their belongings from Mrs. Abernathy's, the elderly woman slipping them out through her back garden to avoid the man watching the front of the house. At the livery, they found their horses already saddled. Jacob's work. Victor suspected. The foresighted man having anticipated potential need for a swift departure. They left Silverton by the Eastern Trail, riding hard until they were well into the mountains. Only then did they slow, choosing less traveled paths that would make pursuit difficult. Hollister won't give up, Violet said as they made camp that evening in a sheltered ravine. 50,000 tells me exactly how valuable that claim is to him. It's not just the value, Victor replied, building a small, smokeless fire. It's control. Men like Hollister can't stand being outmaneuvered, especially by those they consider beneath them. A woman gambler and a cowboy upstart, Violet smiled grimly. His worst nightmare. We have the advantage of underestimation. He still thinks this is about money. Isn't it? Victor looked up from the fire, meeting her gaze across the flames. For me, no. It hasn't been about money since that first night in Silver Reef. What has it been about then? Justice at first. Standing against a bully. He added kindling to the growing flames. Then it became something more. More. You, he said it simply, directly. Standing with you, building something with you, future plans that felt impossible before you rode into town. Violet was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the flickering light. I've never allowed myself to think about the future, she finally said. Not beyond the next town, the next game. Survival consumed everything else. And now I find myself imagining possibilities I never dared consider. She moved around the fire, settling beside him. A home, stability, partnership in business and in life. Victor drew her close, his arm around her shoulders. Sounds like we want the same things. Terrifying, isn't it? Her smile held a touch of wonder. After a lifetime of self-reliance, to suddenly find myself wanting to build a life with someone else. Terrifying, he agreed, and exhilarating. They held each other as night descended, the stars emerging in the clear mountain sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Denver, Ruby's testimony, negotiations with Cornwall Mining. But in that moment, secure in each other's arms, the future seemed full of promise rather than peril. Denver bustled with activity, the boom town having transformed from frontier outpost to metropolitan center in the span of a generation. They arrived after 3 days of hard riding, taking rooms at a modest hotel near the business district under assumed names, a precaution Jacob had advised. The Golden Lady proved to be a cut above the typical saloon: crystal chandeliers, velvet draperies, and a piano player performing classical pieces rather than bawdy tunes. Jacob was waiting at a corner table, deep in conversation with a striking woman in an elegant green gown. "Ruby, I presume," Violet murmured as they approached. The woman looked up, her carefully painted features registering surprise. "Violet Warner, I wondered if I'd see you again. You remember me." Hard to forget the woman who cleaned out Elliot Hollister. Ruby gestured to the empty chairs. "Jacob says you're looking for a witness. That would be me, I suppose." "If you're willing," Victor said, taking a seat. "We understand the risk." Ruby sipped her champagne. "Risk is relative when you've spent your life working in saloons. Besides, I owe Hollister no loyalty. He tried to have me fired after that night, claimed I distracted him during the game." "Did you?" Violet asked. A smile curved Ruby's red lips. "No more than usual. He lost because he was overconfident and you outplayed him. Simple as that." Jacob leaned forward. "Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement to that effect? Perhaps testify if necessary." Ruby considered this. "What's in it for me?" $500, Victor offered. "Plus relocation assistance if you decide Denver becomes uncomfortable." "Make it 1,000, and you have a deal." Ruby's gaze shifted to Violet. "Not that I don't admire what you're doing, honey, but a girl has to look after herself." 1,000 it is, Violet agreed without hesitation. "Plus my personal guarantee of protection should Hollister seek retribution." Ruby's eyebrows rose. "You've come up in the world if you can make guarantees like that." "Let's just say our resources have expanded," Victor explained. "We're meeting with Cornwall Mining tomorrow. With your testimony securing the legitimacy of our claim, we'll be in a strong bargaining position." "Cornwall, Ruby nodded appreciatively. Hollister must be apoplectic. He's been feuding with old man Cornwall for years. All the more reason for Cornwall to be interested in our proposition, Jacob noted. Strategic advantage aside, the opportunity to secure the claim Hollister so desperately wants would be irresistible. They spent the next hour reviewing the details of the fateful poker game, with Ruby confirming every aspect of Violet's account. A lawyer Jacob had retained arrived to take her official statement, the document carefully worded to establish Hollister's sobriety, the legitimacy of the game, and the fair transfer of the deed. When business was concluded, Ruby lingered, her expression turning serious. Word of advice, Violet. Don't underestimate Hollister. He doesn't lose gracefully. We're aware, Victor assured her. Are you? Ruby's eyes held genuine concern. Because what I hear, he's been spreading stories about both of you. Claiming you're partners in a long-running confidence scheme, targeting wealthy businessmen across the territories. Violet tensed. That's absurd. Absurd but effective. He's put out word to banks, business associations, even law enforcement, making your names toxic in certain circles. Jacob looked troubled. This complicates our approach to Cornwall, if rumors have reached them. All the more reason to meet sooner rather than later, Victor decided. Present our case directly with documentation and Ruby's testimony. They parted ways with promises to reconvene after the Cornwall meeting. As they walked back to their hotel, Victor noticed Violet's unusual silence. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly. No, she shook her head firmly. Just processing. Hollister's more vindictive than I anticipated. Making this personal rather than business. It was always personal for him. Wounded pride, threatened control, and now he's trying to destroy my reputation. She laughed softly, bitterly. What's left of it anyway? Victor stopped, turning to face her. Your reputation doesn't define you, Violet. Not anymore. We're building something new, something neither Hollister nor anyone else can tarnish. She studied his face in the gaslit street, searching for any doubt, any hesitation. Finding none, she straightened her shoulders, resolve returning to her expression. You're right. Let Hollister spread his lies. We have the truth, and soon, allies powerful enough to make that truth matter. The following morning found them in the imposing headquarters of Cornwall Mining, ushered into a conference room where 3 men awaited them. William Cornwall himself, patriarch of the family and founder of the company, sat at the head of the table, a bear of a man with a shock of white hair and penetrating blue eyes. Mr. Blackburn, Miss Warner. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man of his size. Jacob has spoken highly of you both, says you have a proposition that might interest me. Victor led the presentation, outlining the Star Creek claim's location, mineral potential, and strategic significance. Jacob provided geological reports and production estimates. Violet explained the claim's acquisition, supported by the deed and Ruby's sworn testimony. Cornwall listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When they finished, he leaned back, studying them thoughtfully. Impressive case. Well documented. His gaze settled on Violet. Must have been quite a poker game. I play to win, Mr. Cornwall, clearly. A smile creased his weathered face. And now Hollister wants his property back. Been spreading some nasty rumors about you too. We're aware, Victor replied. Baseless accusations from a man who can't accept defeat, Cornwall nodded slowly. I've known Elliot Hollister for 20 years, competed against him, occasionally collaborated with him, know his methods well. He tapped his fingers on the table. He's ruthless, but not usually careless. Putting a valuable claim in a poker pot, not his style. He was confident of winning, Violet explained. Had won consistently all evening, became overconfident, and you exploited that. There was no judgment in Cornwall's tone, merely assessment. Risky strategy, taking on a man with his resources. I didn't know who he was at the time, Violet admitted. Just another wealthy man at a card table. By the time I understood the implications, it was too late to back down. Cornwall's laugh was unexpectedly warm. Honesty. Refreshing in this business. He glanced at his associates, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Here's my offer. $75,000 for the claim, full ownership transferred to Cornwall Mining. Victor and Violet exchanged glances. The amount was higher than they had anticipated, confirmation of the claim's true value. Or, Cornwall continued before they could respond, a minority partnership. $25,000 cash plus 20% interest in the developed mine. Cornwall provides capital, equipment, workers. You share in the profits without the day-to-day headaches. The partnership would include protection, Victor clarified, against Hollister's interference. Naturally, Cornwall Mining protects its interests and its partners. The older man's expression turned serious. Though I should warn you, accepting either offer makes you Hollister's enemy for life. He doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. Violet straightened in her chair. With respect, Mr. Cornwall, we're already his enemies. The only question is whether we face him alone or with allies. Cornwall studied her with newfound respect. Well said, Miss Warner. He turned to Victor. You have an exceptional partner, Mr. Blackburn, in business, and I suspect otherwise. I'm well aware, Victor replied, his hand finding Violet's beneath the table. Take the evening to consider both offers. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning for your decision. As they left the Cornwall building, Victor could feel the weight of decision before them. $75,000 is a substantial sum, he observed. Enough to secure your future, whatever you choose. Our future, Violet corrected. And money alone isn't security. As a gambler, I learned that lesson early. The partnership, then, it has advantages. Cornwall's protection, ongoing income rather than a one-time payment. She glanced at him. And it keeps us connected to Colorado, if that's something you want. What I want is to build a life with you, Violet. The location is secondary. He guided her through the busy street toward their hotel. But I admit, having interests in both territories creates flexibility. Summers in Colorado, winters in Utah. The best of both worlds. She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features. Listen to us, planning domestic arrangements like an established couple. Isn't that what we are? Or what we're becoming? I suppose we are. She squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with emotion. It still feels surreal making plans beyond the next town, the next game. Good surreal, I hope. The best kind. She hesitated, then added softly, I love you, Victor. I'm not sure when it happened, but somewhere between Silver Reef and here, you became essential to me. He stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, heedless of the people flowing around them, and kissed her. I love you too, he whispered against her lips. And I can pinpoint exactly when I knew the moment you stood up to Hollister in his hotel suite, refusing to be intimidated. Courage has always been the quality I admire most. They continued toward their hotel, discussing details of the potential partnership with Cornwall. So absorbed in conversation, they failed to notice the men following at a discreet distance. The attack came swiftly as they turned down a less populated side street. 4 men surrounded them, moving with practiced coordination. Victor reached for his gun but froze when he saw the badge on the leader's chest. Victor Blackburn, Violet Warner, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and theft. On whose authority? Victor demanded, recognizing none of the men as legitimate Denver law officers. Denver Police Department, the badge wearer replied, producing official-looking papers. Complaint filed by Elliot Hollister of Hollister Mining. You'll come peacefully, or we'll add resisting arrest to the charges. Violet's hand tightened on Victor's arm, a silent warning against resistance. They were outnumbered, and causing a scene would only reinforce Hollister's narrative of them as criminals. "We'll come," she said calmly, "but I suggest you verify your information. Mr. Cornwall of Cornwall Mining can vouch for our legitimate business in Denver." The leader's expression flickered momentarily, suggesting Cornwall's name carried weight even among Hollister's pawns. Nevertheless, they were escorted to a waiting wagon and transported not to the city jail but to a private office on the outskirts of Denver. Inside, Elliot Hollister waited, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Miss Warner, Mr. Blackburn. How unfortunate to meet again under these circumstances." "Cut the charade, Hollister," Victor growled. "These aren't real officers and these aren't legal arrests. Technical distinctions. These men are employed as security by various businesses in Denver, including mine. They have limited authority to detain those suspected of crimes against property." "What you're doing is kidnapping," Violet stated, her voice steady despite the danger. "Cornwall Mining expects us at a meeting tomorrow morning. When we don't appear, questions will be asked. By then, this unfortunate situation will be resolved." Hollister gestured to chairs positioned before his desk. "Please sit. Despite appearances, this can still end amicably." Victor remained standing. "There's nothing amicable about false imprisonment." Such dramatic language. Hollister sighed. "I'm simply creating an opportunity for us to conclude our business without further escalation. Cornwall's involvement changes the equation somewhat." "Did you expect us to meekly accept your threats?" Violet asked. "To surrender what's legally mine without seeking allies?" "I expected professionals to recognize when they are outmatched." Hollister's smile turned cold. "Yes, I've investigated your backgrounds thoroughly. Victor Blackburn, formerly Victor Benson, who changed his name after tracking down and killing the man responsible for his mother's death." Victor stiffened, the revelation of his most closely guarded secret hitting like a physical blow. "Self-defense," he managed. "Garrett drew first, perhaps, but the circumstances were ambiguous, enough to raise serious questions should the case be reopened." Hollister turned to Violet. "And Miss Warner, with her impressive record of fortunate wins against wealthy men across 3 territories. Nothing proven, of course, but patterns suggest strategy rather than luck. I play cards well. That's not a crime. Again, interpretation matters. Particularly when influential men provide consistent testimony suggesting otherwise." Hollister leaned forward, his expression almost conciliatory. "I don't want to destroy either of you. I simply want what belongs to me, the Star Creek claim." "It doesn't belong to you," Violet insisted. "I want it fairly. A matter of perspective, which brings us to my proposition." Hollister opened a drawer, removing a document. "A sworn statement acknowledging that you misrepresented the circumstances of our game, that alcohol and manipulation were involved. A simple signature, and this entire matter disappears." "And the claim?" Victor asked, though he knew the answer. "Reverts to me naturally. In exchange, you receive $20,000, the original amount, and my word that no criminal charges will be pursued against either of you." Victor laughed bitterly. "Your word. The same word you gave when you put that deed in the pot. Circumstances change. I'm being more than generous considering the alternative." "Which is?" Hollister's expression hardened. "Official charges. Your background's exposed. Whatever arrangement you've made with Cornwall invalidated by the cloud of suspicion. At best, you'll be financial and social pariahs. At worst, prison." Victor and Violet exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. They had anticipated Hollister's desperation, but not the extent of his research or his willingness to expose their pasts. "We need to confer privately," Victor finally said. Hollister nodded, gesturing to his men. 5 minutes. In the adjoining room." Once alone, Victor pulled Violet close, speaking directly into her ear to avoid potential listening devices. He's desperate, wouldn't have resorted to this otherwise. He knows about Garrett, she whispered back. That's not public knowledge. No. Which means he has connections in law enforcement across territories. Expensive connections. Victor's mind raced through possibilities. We need to stall, give Cornwall time to realize something's wrong. How long before they notice our absence? Not until morning. Too long. Violet pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. There might be another way, something my father taught me: always have an ace up your sleeve. Understanding dawned in Victor's expression. The deed. He thinks it's our only proof of ownership, but not the only documentation. She smiled thinly. We filed the claim in Silverton. It's registered, official. Even if we sign his statement, even if we surrender the original deed, the claim remains legally ours, and Cornwall already has copies of all documentation. Victor squeezed her hands. It's risky. Hollister will retaliate when he discovers the deception. By then, we'll have Cornwall's protection and evidence of Hollister's illegal detention of us. They rejoined Hollister with their decision apparently made. We'll sign, Victor announced. With one modification payment in cash immediately, then we leave Denver tonight. Hollister studied them, suspicion warring with triumph. You surrender more easily than I expected. We're pragmatists, Violet replied. When the game turns against you, sometimes it's wisest to fold and live to play another day. Something in her phrasing must have satisfied Hollister's understanding of her character, for he nodded. Cash can be arranged. The documents are prepared. Sign and this unpleasantness ends. They signed the fraudulent statement, exchanged the deed for a stack of bills that Victor counted meticulously, and were escorted to the city limits with warnings never to return to Denver or Silverton. He bought it, Violet murmured as they rode away, the false officers watching until they disappeared from view. But he'll discover the truth soon enough. Not soon enough to stop Cornwall. Victor urged his horse faster. We need to reach Jacob, explain what happened. He can contact Cornwall, proceed with our arrangement while we establish alibis elsewhere. Where? Silver Reef to start. My territory, my people. Hollister has less influence there. They rode through the night, changing horses at a way station Jacob had suggested during their planning. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Denver, following a route that would eventually lead them back to Utah territory. 3 days into their journey, they received word via telegraph at a small settlement Cornwall had proceeded with their partnership agreement, filing the necessary documents in Silverton based on the copies they had provided. Hollister had indeed discovered their deception and attempted to block the transaction, but Cornwall's influence, combined with the legally filed claim, had prevailed. We did it, Violet breathed as they read the message. 20% interest in the Star Creek mine, development to begin immediately. Victor drew her into his arms, relief and triumph mingling. Plus 20,000 of Hollister's money, not a bad outcome for a few weeks' work. And Hollister, Jacob says he's furious but contained. Cornwall's lawyers have made it clear that any move against us will be interpreted as an attack on Cornwall Mining's interests. Victor pressed a kiss to her forehead. We're not safe, but we're safer than we were. They continued toward Silver Reef at a more leisurely pace, the urgency of their flight diminished by Cornwall's protection. As they traveled, they discussed their future, dividing time between Utah and Colorado, using the income from the mine to expand the Double B Ranch, perhaps diversifying into other ventures. I've been thinking, Violet said one evening as they camped beneath the stars, about what happens when we reach Silver Reef. Oh, Victor looked up from tending the fire. People will talk. The respectable rancher returning with the notorious gambler. Your reputation means less to me than being with you, he interrupted. But if you're concerned about appearances, I'm not for myself. She met his gaze steadily. But I thought perhaps if you were amenable, we might give them less to talk about. And how would we manage that? By arriving as husband and wife. Victor's heart stuttered in his chest. Violet Warner, are you proposing to me? A smile curved her lips. Inelegantly, perhaps, but yes. Her expression turned serious. I love you, Victor. These past weeks have shown me a future I never dared imagine. If you want that too. He crossed to her side, taking her hands in his. I was planning to ask you myself once we reached Silver Reef, had a whole speech prepared about new beginnings and shared dreams. You still can. I'd like to hear it, he laughed, dropping to one knee. Violet Warner, from the moment you rode into Silver Reef, you've brought nothing but trouble into my life, the best kind of trouble. Adventure, purpose, love. Will you marry me, join our lives as we've joined our fortunes, and make me the happiest man in 2 territories? Yes, she whispered, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. Yes, to all of it. They were married 2 days later in a small church in Cedar City with Caleb Wilson as witness. The ceremony was simple, the promises profound. By the time they reached Silver Reef, they wore matching gold bands. Victor's mother's ring resized for Violet's finger, a new one crafted for him. Their arrival caused the expected stir. Victor Blackburn returning with a bride. And not just any bride, but the woman known briefly as the Red Rose of Denver. Marshall Jenkins, chastened by the discovery of his dealings with Hollister, offered stiff congratulations before requesting reassignment to another town. The citizens of Silver Reef, initially skeptical, gradually warmed to Violet as she established herself not as a gambler but as a shrewd businesswoman. She took an active role in managing the ranch accounts, introduced improvements based on practices she had observed in her travels, and used her connections to secure favorable contracts for the double BTKS cattle. News from Colorado arrived regularly via Jacob's letters. The Star Creek mine had begun production, yielding ore of exceptional quality. Cornwall Mining had expanded the operation beyond initial projections, increasing the value of their 20% interest substantially. Hollister, faced with Cornwall's growing presence in Silverton, had been forced to negotiate access rights through the Star Creek property, a concession that must have been particularly galling. 6 months after their return to Silver Reef, Victor and Violet hosted a celebration at the ranch, ostensibly to mark the completion of improvements to the main house, but in truth to share more personal news. As friends and neighbors gathered in the expanded dining room, Victor rose to make an announcement. Many of you were skeptical when I brought Violet home as my wife, he began, his hand finding hers. You'd heard rumors, whispers about the trouble she would bring into my life. Chuckles rippled through the assembled guests, the trouble having transformed into prosperity and happiness visible to all. Those rumors weren't entirely wrong, Victor continued, smiling at his wife. She has indeed brought trouble, the kind that shakes a man out of complacency, that challenges him to be better, braver, more alive. Violet's eyes shone with unshed tears as she squeezed his hand. And now, she's bringing a new kind of trouble. He placed his free hand gently over her stomach, still flat, but harboring their greatest treasure. The kind that will keep us awake at night, that will fill this house with noise and joy, that will carry our names and our love into the future. Cheers erupted as their friends understood the announcement. Congratulations flowed, along with advice from experienced parents and good-natured teasing about the adventures ahead. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Victor led Violet onto the porch, seeking a moment of privacy beneath the star-filled Utah sky. Happy, he asked, drawing her close. Beyond anything I could have imagined. She rested her head against his shoulder. When I rode into Silver Reef that day, I was running away from one life, not realizing I was riding toward another. Even though everyone warned you'd bring me nothing but trouble, she laughed softly. As I recall, you said you'd been bored too long. Best decision I ever made. Victor tilted her face up to his. Here's to trouble, Mrs. Blackburn. May it never end. Never, she agreed, rising on tiptoes to meet his kiss, their promise sealed beneath the vast western sky, their future unfolding like the endless frontier before them. In the years that followed, the legend of Victor and Violet Blackburn grew throughout the territories. The tale of the notorious gambler and the rancher who defied convention became part of Western folklore, embellished with each retelling, but maintaining its essential truth that love, like courage, sometimes requires risking everything on a single bold play. Their daughter, born the following spring, inherited her mother's sharp mind and her father's steady determination. Their son, arriving 2 years later, showed early signs of his father's leadership and his mother's flair for strategy. The Double B Ranch prospered, as did their interests in the Star Creek mine, creating a legacy that would sustain generations. Elliot Hollister never forgave the humiliation of his defeat, but Cornwall's protection and the Blackburns' growing influence limited his options for retribution. When financial panic struck Colorado's silver industry, Hollister's overextended empire collapsed, while the Blackburns' diversified holdings weathered the storm. In later years, when visitors to the expanded Blackburn home admired the simple wooden plaque hanging in a place of honor above the fireplace, they often asked about its meaning. The words, carved in Victor's hand, read, "They said she'd bring him trouble." Violet would smile and complete the phrase that had become their family motto, "Then I've been bored too long." It served as a reminder that life's greatest adventures often begin when we embrace the very challenges others warn us against, and that true love recognizes potential where others see only risk. For Victor and Violet Blackburn, what had begun as trouble had transformed into the greatest blessing of all, a shared life built on courage, trust, and the willingness to wager everything on each other.